Now let's get on to the next major organ in the insect head capsule, the mouth parts. We're actually going to spend the next few lectures looking at the mouth parts so you get an idea of what they're made up of and how they change as insects have evolved over time. So the mouth parts are exactly what you think they would be. They allow the insect to take in food when needed, and they may also be used as a defense mechanism against enemies. We break up the types of mouth parts based on the way that they work. The first type is called mandibulate. Mandibulate mouth parts are a chewing type of mouth part, and this is the most primitive type of mouth part. We find this on insects that are generalist feeders, that feed on pretty much whatever, sometimes on predators, that sort of thing. Now, the ancestors of insects and the most ancient insect types have these types of mouth parts. The much more specialized types of mouth parts that we see are all derived from these mandibulate types. So this is that ancient type. Everything comes from this ancient mandibulate mouth part. The more specialized types of mouth parts we call hostulate. These hostulate mouth parts include piercing and sucking mouth parts, probing and sifting mouth parts, and sponging and lapping mouth parts. Now, since all mouth parts are derived from the same basic mandibulate mouth part, if you know the basic parts of that chewing mouth part, of that mandibulate mouth part, then you're going to be able to figure out what is going on with the more specialized ones. So this is something that you're going to be doing in lab this week. You're going to dissect out the grasshopper and look at the mouth parts of this grasshopper. Remember that the grasshopper represents an ancient form of insects. This is a great way to study all the body parts that an insect has, simply by dissecting them out and looking at them piece by piece. So let's look at the individual parts that make up the mandibulate mouth parts. There are 5 basic components with the mouth parts. We start out with the top where we have the labrum. So the labrum is an upper lip type of area. It forms the roof of the preoral cavity. It's attached to the clypeus at the top here. See it? Bam. There. Labrum, clypeus. Okay. And so it forms the roof of that mouth. The labrum will cover the base of the mandibles. The second component is a tongue-like structure here called the hypopharynx. Hypo means below, as in a hypodermic needle, below the skin. Dermic means skin. And pharynx is really the fancy name for throat. So the hypopharynx sits below the throat in insects. It'll extend forward from the back of the preoral cavity, and in mandibulate mouth parts, it's very, very tiny. So you can see it here, it's very small. But in some hostulate mouth parts, it is really elongate. So it's got much longer and has a much more specialized function. So it's really the basic tongue of the insect. The third component is lateral to that hypopharynx, right underneath the labrum. We've got the mandibles. So the mandibles are also known as the jaws, and they will be used to cut and to crush food or to bite in defense. In general, they have an apical cutting edge or a sharpened cutting edge here, which will allow for cutting or slicing through food or enemies, and then a flatter grinding area back here, which will allow for the crushing and for the grinding of difficult food, so that it can be easily digested. Now, the mandibles in insects can be extremely hard. There are termites and some beetles that have these mandibles that are so incredibly tough. They have the ability to cut through things like copper and lead and tin. So these are really, really tough organs in the mouth parts. Behind the mandibles are the maxillae. So the maxillae will help the mandibles process the food. They have several parts that have different names. You don't need to know these different names for the purposes of this class, but that will help cut the food, that will help slice the food, that will help keep the food in contact with the mandibles and help to taste the food. So these mandibles and these maxilla working together work a lot like our own jaws. We've got these front incisor teeth, right, that will cut and slice into food. We've got these back molars that will grind the food, and everything sort of keeps it all together. So it's the same basic idea. Now, the tasting in the maxillae, this is done by the segmented maxillary palps. So you can see those here, maxillary palp, maxillary palp. So these segmented maxillary palps have these sensory hairs that are chemo and mechanoreceptors. So this will allow the insect to taste the food before it even fully enters the preoral cavity. Now, this is an important characteristic if you think about it. Taste is a major way that living things determine if food is going to cause a problem. So think about it. When was the last time you ate something that made you sick? After your stomach took care of those problems, right? You ate something, you puked it right back up. Your taste receptors are going to let your brain know that that food, that taste that you then associated with sickness is bad for you. Anytime you taste or even smell that food substance, your stomach's going to turn a little bit. Your brain's going to say, oh, no, that tried to kill us. So your taste receptors are going to keep you from eating that food again, so you won't easily be able to get sick again, hopefully. This is a protective mechanism. It keeps you safe from eating all manner of nasty things. This works the same exact way in insects. These maxillary palps hanging on the outside of the maxillae, right sort of behind the mandibles, they're going to touch this food. They're going to taste this food first and foremost. It's going to send signals to the insect brain, that dorsal brain, to let that insect know if this food is dangerous or not. If it tastes, quote unquote, good, it's going to be fine. They're going to chew on it. They're going to eat it. If it tastes awful, it's going to just spit it out. It hasn't even made it to the mandibles yet, so the insect is safe. So that tasting is the same mechanism that we have. It's just carried out by something slightly different. We taste with our tongue. They taste with these maxillary palps. Now, the last component of the insect mouth parts is the labium. That happens down here. So this is this bottom lip type of area. It's made up of two lobes called the ligula. So these ligula work in pairs to make up the full labium. It makes up the base of the preoral cavity, or the mouth, and hanging off each ligula is a labial palp. So these labial palps have the same type of sensory functions that the maxillary palps have. Now, we see a lot of examples of different types of mouth parts out in the big bad world. Remember that 80% of all described animals are arthropods, which means there's a huge opportunity for diversity in the mouth parts. And over the next 2 lectures, we're going to go over some of these mouth parts in extreme detail, but just to give you an idea of some of the diversity of these mouth parts, let's look at some major examples. The first major type of mouthpart are the chewing mouthparts. These are those primitive mouthparts that I just went over, all those parts that I just went over. And as I said before, these are the least specialized. This type of mouthpart is found in most immature stages of insects, so like caterpillars and things, as well as many adults of insects. It's characterized by those large sclerotized mandibles. These mandibles, you can see here, are attached to large muscles in the head. This allows for these big, powerful bites of these insects, or to take big chunks out of food, or to take bites out of prey or enemies. Saliva tends to be excreted into the preoral cavity, and it's mixed with food during chewing. So it, again, is a lot like our own mouth parts. It makes it easier to maybe pre-digest that food a little bit, to swallow that food a little more easily, and to taste that food a little more easily. The second type of mouth parts are known as cutting and sponging mouth parts. So these cutting, sponging mouth parts, this is when we start to see some specialization from the basic mandibulate mouth parts. So these are limited to a number of adult flies that feed as parasites on mammalian blood. You will see them in things like horseflies and black flies. The mouth parts are elongated and they're pointed to pierce into the skin. They cause bleeding, and once that host is bleeding, that blood is then sponged up and sucked into the mouth. Anticoagulants are produced in the insect's saliva in this case that will be pumped into the wound and keep that wound from clotting. This is going to keep the blood flowing for a good amount of time, and that wound will cause other insects to come in and feed on it after this cutting and sponging insect leaves. Now, the third type is just the straight sponging mouth part. These are found only in adults of more specialized flies, like the housefly or the blowfly. In this case, the mandibles are completely lost. So, the mandibles are they're vestigial. They're way up here, super, super tiny. And the rest of the organs are elongated and turned into this big sponging thing. So the flies don't bite. They don't have mandibles to bite. Instead, they exhibit that exodigestion. They pump digestive juices onto their food. The enzymes break down the food into the digestive products, and then the food can be abraded by small teeth on the mouth parts in some of these, dissolved and suspended into liquid and sponged up. Tasting in these cases are actually carried out primarily by sensory hairs on the feet and on the tarsi, and then on the end of the mouth parts themselves. So the maxillary palps, the labial palps don't have as much of a tasting function initially. So it's the feet and the end of the mouth parts that do that in this case. Siphoning mouth parts are found in butterflies and moths. These parts are used to suction up liquid food, like nectar, from the bases of flowers and plants. When they're not in use, these siphoning mouth parts are coiled beneath the head of the insect, and we end up seeing a lot of coevolution between the mouth parts and what the insect eats. So since these are inserted into flowers, you can see that happening right here in order to suck up that nectar, the longer flowers require longer siphoning mouth parts in order to get to the base of that flower and get to that nectar. So you get nice long flowers and an associated insect with really, really long mouth parts in order to get there. If you have an insect that feeds primarily on tiny flowers, they're going to have much shorter mouth parts that have co-evolved with those tiny flowers. Piercing and sucking mouth parts, these are the extension of those basic mandibulate mouth parts. You've got the labrum, you've got the hypopharynx, you've got the mandibles, you've got the maxillae, but they're all elongated and extended into points. These parts then all fit together to form needle-like or tube-like mouth parts that can pierce into skin, pierce into plants, and get the fluid inside another organism. So we see these types of mouth parts in a lot of animal and plant pests. We see them in mosquitoes, we see them in plant bugs, we see them in that sort of thing. In these cases, saliva is often injected directly into that plant or into that animal, and it can carry with it all manner of chemicals, from anticoagulants to digestive enzymes to things that completely shut down the immune system. This allows for bugs to suck out all the nutrients it needs very, very easily without having to fight physically against that other organism. Finally, chewing and lapping mouth parts. These are specialized in adult bees and bumblebees. These are used to feed on liquid food in the form of nectar and honey, and to cut into flowers to gain access to that nectar, to defend themselves when they're being attacked by something, and to mold wax into honeycomb. So they have all these different functions in this case. So this is a close-up of the chewing and lapping mouth parts in a bee. You can see that you've got these elongated mandibles and hypopharynx, which will allow for that cutting, for that lapping, for that chewing, and for that molding of that wax. So that covers the very basics of the mouth parts and gives you a quick overview of these different types. Over the next 2 lectures, I'm going to go into much more detail about the mouth parts so that we can discuss how each part works. This should allow you to observe the mouth parts of any insects that you see and what you see in lab, and then make an educated guess as to what these insects feed on and what they don't feed on. Let me know if you have any questions.